Welcome to the deep dive. Ever had that thought, I'm just not cut out for languages?
Or maybe you're a teacher and you're wondering if maybe your older students have missed the boat somehow.
Exactly. Today we're jumping into something that really affects a lot of us, these persistent myths that float around about language learning and linguistics.
That's right. We've gathered quite a few sources, some really insightful notes and excerpts from a book that specifically tackles these kinds of misconceptions.
And our mission today is pretty straightforward. Use this material to sort the facts from the fiction, see what the research actually tells us.
And for you, listening in, whether you're learning a language yourself, teaching one, maybe helping your kids navigate it all, the goal is clarity.
Yeah, to get past the myths, find better strategies, and feel, more confident about your own journey or how you support others.
Okay, let's dig in then.
Right. First up, this giant one. It's practically folklore. Kids are just naturally better language learners than adults. It feels right, doesn't it? You see kids just absorb language.
It absolutely feels that way. That belief is incredibly strong.
Yeah.
But the factual counterpoint our sources bring up is really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
While children definitely have advantages, sheer time, constant input adults, surprisingly, can often learn faster,
Yeah.
more efficiently anyway.
Faster, really? How? What gives adults the edge?
Well, think about the cognitive toolkit adults have. Stronger metacognition, for starters.
The ability to think about how you're learning.
Exactly. Monitoring your understanding, strategizing. Plus, adults usually have solid literacy skills already, which is a huge help for analyzing language and, often more disciplined, clearer goals.
Ah, okay. So it's not just passively soaking it up, which kids seem great at. Adults have these, analytical tools they can actively use.
Precisely. And the research supports this. There's specific evidence showing adult learners leveraging these strengths to outperform younger students in certain tasks. Think complex grammar, sophisticated reading.
This is where it really challenges that common idea of the critical period hypothesis, then, that biological cutoff point for language.
It certainly challenges the strictest interpretations, yeah. The sources mention the CPH's origins, influential work suggesting a biological window, especially for getting a native accent down perfectly.
But it's maybe not that simple.
Well, modern neuroscience and behavioral studies paint a more nuanced picture. Getting that completely effortless, native-like accent, that might be harder for many adults. But achieving really high levels of fluency, accuracy, communication, absolutely possible. Success stories are everywhere.
So the CPH isn't like a door slamming shut, maybe more like the learning process changes.
That's a great way to put it. And the implication for you, the listener, is huge. If you're learning as an adult, your brain isn't worse, it's just different. Those differences, analysis, conscious application of rules, can actually be advantages.
Which really should change how we approach teaching different age groups, right?
Absolutely. Tailor the strategies to the strengths.
Okay, let's tackle another classic. This one feels baked into a lot of traditional classrooms. You absolutely must master all the grammar rules before you try speaking.
Oh, yeah. Or the related idea that language is basically just a pile of vocabulary words and grammar rules.
Right.
And this myth can be seriously terrorizing. It creates so much anxiety. But the reality is, fluency, just being able to get your ideas across, often develops way before you've perfectly nailed all the formal grammar.
Like when we learned our first language, right? We were chatting away long before we knew what a past participle was.
Exactly. So agonizing over getting every verb ending perfect before you open your mouth, it can actually slow you down.
Counterproductive, then.
Very much so, potentially. Grammar can be picked up more naturally, sort of implicitly, through lots of input and just using the language. Our sources suggest letting learners speak to think.
Speak to think. I like that.
Yeah, prioritize getting the meaning out, communicating, and then refine the grammar over time. Trying to be perfect from day one often just leads to silence.
That really shifts the focus. And speaking of focus, the idea that language is only words and rules, it feels so flat.
It is incredibly incomplete. Language is so much richer. It's cultural, it's emotional, it's social. Reducing it like that misses the point, really.
So what are those crucial things that get missed?
Well, things like pragmatics, for instance. Understanding how context changes meaning.
How the situation, who you're talking to, all that matters.
Hugely. It's not just what you say, but how you say it when you say it. Tone, body language, knowing when to be formal or informal. That's all vital for real communication. Learning a language means learning its social and cultural rules, too.
So real proficiency involves getting idioms, understanding emotional expression, learning how to, say, disagree politely in that language.
You got it. And this ties into something interesting. The sources mention the great grammar debate in linguistics.
Ah, prescriptive versus descriptive.
Exactly. Prescriptive linguistics is about the rules, how language should be used according to some authority. Think grammar books telling you not to end a sentence with a preposition.
The rulebook approach.
Right. And descriptive linguistics studies how people actually use language in real life, variations and all.
And teaching has often leaned heavily on the prescriptive side.
Historically, yes. Sometimes too heavily, perhaps stifling natural communication. Understanding this difference highlights why we need a balance. Teach useful structures, absolutely, but also immerse learners in and encourage the use of real, authentic language.
Okay, here's one that can really hit confidence levels hard. The idea that some people just aren't language people, they don't have the knack.
The language gene myth.
Yeah.
And it often goes hand in hand with another pressure, that the only real goal is sounding exactly like a native speaker.
So two damaging ideas there. What's the reality on the aptitude part?
Well, language aptitude, like how quickly someone might pick up patterns, does vary a bit, sure. But the research is really clear on this. Things like your motivation, the amount and quality of exposure you get, and critically, your mindset.
Your belief that you can learn.
Exactly. Those are far, far stronger predictors of success than any supposed innate talent. Pretty much anyone can significantly improve their language skills. It takes time, consistency, the right approach, but it's achievable.
So it's less about being gifted and way more about effort and environment.
That's what the evidence strongly suggests. The sources point to studies where learners with maybe lower initial aptitude scores still reach high proficiency levels through good immersion and support. Your starting block doesn't dictate the finish line.
That's really encouraging. And it leads right into that second part, the pressure to sound native.
Yes. And here's the liberating truth from our sources. You absolutely do not need to sound like a native speaker to be fluent.
Okay, define fluent then in this context.
Fluency means being understood and communicating effectively, getting your message across. That's the core function of language, isn't it?
Yeah, and in today's world, you're often communicating with people from all different language backgrounds anyway.
Precisely. Native-like pronunciation just isn't the necessary benchmark, especially when we talk about English as a lingua franca, or ELF.
Where English is used between non-native speakers.
Right. In those situations, the goal is mutual intelligibility, clarity, not mimicking a Londoner or a New Yorker. Sometimes, trying too hard to erase your accent can even make you less fluent because you're overthinking pronunciation.
So for teachers, the focus should be on clear, understandable speech, not chasing some perfect accent.
Absolutely. And the sources actually go deeper, challenging the whole concept of a single perfect native speaker. They talk about native speakerism.
That bias towards native speakers as the only legitimate teachers or models.
Exactly. And there's solid evidence showing this view is flawed and, frankly, often discriminatory. It devalues highly skilled non-native speaker teachers and sets unrealistic goals.
Yeah, I can see how that would be limiting.
It really can be. And it connects to another myth, linguistic purity, the idea that mixing languages or code switching is somehow a mistake or shows you don't know either language well.
But isn't code switching pretty normal for multilingual people?
Totally normal, and often very skillful. Sociolinguistics shows us it's a tool. People code switch to communicate more effectively, express identity, connect with certain people. It's a resource, not an error.
So classrooms should maybe embrace that instead of penalizing it.
That's the implication. Recognize the student's full linguistic toolkit. The sources even briefly question standardized tests like TEFL or IELTS. Do they really measure real-world communicative ability?
Good question. They have their limits.
They do. There's a push towards rethinking fluency in assessment, looking at alternative models.
Why does busting these myths matter so much?
Because it empowers learners. It sets realistic, healthy goals. It challenges biases in education and testing that can hold people back. It's about valuing clear, effective communication, however it sounds.
All right, let's wrap up our myth-busting tour with a look at how we learn and teach. First, this popular idea. Immersion is the only real way. Just drop yourself in the country.
Right, the sink or swim approach.
Yeah.
And look, immersion can be incredibly powerful. There's good science behind its benefits, massive input, constant practice opportunities.
Yeah.
But the source is caution. It's not foolproof. It can fail. Sometimes learners get overwhelmed cognitively or face social isolation, even when surrounded by the language. Just hearing it isn't always enough.
So exposure alone isn't the magic ingredient.
Not necessarily. Hmm. Structured input language presented in a way that's comprehensible, maybe with some guidance, is often more effective, especially early on, than just random natural exposure.
Like needing a swimming lesson before being thrown in the deep end.
That's a perfect analogy. Which leads nicely to the next myth, the idea of a single best teaching method. Grammar translation, communicative approach, task-based learning.
Is there a winner?
According to our sources, absolutely not. There's no one-size-fits-all miracle method. Context is everything, meaning the learner's age, their goals, their first language, the learning setting, the available resources. All these things matter hugely. The most effective teaching usually involves customizing and blending approaches. Sticking rigidly to one method is rarely the best plan.
So teachers and learners need flexibility, a toolbox of strategies.
Exactly. Be adaptable. Interestingly, the sources also mention the value of something quite traditional, reading aloud.
Really? Not just silent reading.
Yeah. Apparently, reading aloud actively helps with pronunciation, internalizing the rhythm and stress of a language. It aids memory, improves focus, and especially useful if your first language sounds very different.
Things like shadow reading along with audio or group choral reading.
Simple but effective tools, yes.
Yeah.
And finally, let's touch on the tech myth, the hype around digital tools being a silver bullet for language learning.
The idea that an app will just make you fluent.
Kind of, yeah. The sources acknowledge the benefits apps, AI, tutors, virtual reality.
Yeah.
They offer great practice, accessibility, personalization, no doubt.
But there's a but again.
There is a caution against over-reliance. These are powerful tools, but they generally supplement, not replace, the need for deeper understanding, strategic learning, and real human interaction.
So they're useful additions to the toolkit, not the whole workshop itself.
Well put. Understand this helps everyone, learners, teachers, critically evaluate all the options out there and figure out what actually works best for their specific situation and goals.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's really clear just how widespread these language learning myths are.
Yeah, and how they can actually hinder progress beliefs about age, attitude, grammar, fluency.
But the encouraging thing is that the research, the evidence from linguistics and language acquisition, gives us really powerful tools to see past them.
Absolutely. It helps us teach more effectively, learn more intelligently, and just generally support learners, including ourselves, much better.
Taking all this on board, it really does fundamentally shift how you think about language learning and teaching, doesn't it? It moves us away from these sort of fixed, often limiting ideas.
Towards something much more nuanced, flexible, and ultimately more empowering.
Which leaves us with a pretty big final thought to chew on, building on what we've discussed from the sources. Given everything we now understand about how much learners vary, about language being so much more than just rules, about the limits of old methods and tests, how profoundly do our language education systems really need to change?
You mean to actually prepare people for effective communication in the kind of multilingual, tech-infused world we actually live in?
Exactly. How do schools, adult programs, maybe even policy need to adapt?
That is a very significant question, definitely something to keep thinking about.